The night granaries pretend locks can quiet hunger, so you set the horn lamp on a damp meal sack at the mouth of the Mercato di Mezzo, until a warm coin of light lands where rope, ladle, rumor, and breath must agree, or Bologna will let Famine draft headlines while POX buys the afterword. The gabellieri balance bread tickets like feathers, too light for what they're asked to weigh. A friar low in the hood rehearses a psalm he thinks will frighten sores back into silence. Two silk clerks count loaves with the arithmetic of men who have never counted nights. Your lane is the place where winter stands to listen, between barley scales, a shuttered bagnio, a baker's oven that has slept longer this week than the baker has. Famine does not shout, it exhales, and POX, which travels better in exhausted rooms than in crowded squares, exerts itself precisely when lamps dim. Watch the dark hours, the Essecutori wrote, and you are the warden meant to turn that sentence into a street that does not lie. Rope makes the street truthful when breath would prefer poetry. You square the mouth of the granary passage because ankles obey what sermons forget, and you nail counsel at mouth height where wrists must bruise before mouths rent thunder. Witness heard, charter read aloud, oath copied, billet listed, fever first, wash before rumor, wash before coin, door unbarred, window latched, straw aired, pallet raised, no crowd at bench, fees displayed, thanks before charges. The plank says present, the quarter-glass boy flips his sand like a small podesta with better manners. The sisters of steam, bath women whose copper pulls light out of water, drag their kettle beneath your rope and bully superstition into tasks. The baker's boy, face tired in the way bread is noble when it fails, knocks the plank with flour-coated knuckles and asks if heat is still medicine. Heat and minutes, you say, and hand him the ladle. Because this square is also the rectangle in your palm, do the practical thing that turns attention into rope. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one. So part 2 lands while your wrists still remember the grammar. In the comments, give your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories. And tell us what your quarter calls sermons sold as medicine. The sisters will pin the bravest beside the well bisexed. Famine is a quiet engineer. It narrows hallways when doors close, lowers candles until wrists argue, moves families into corners where patience crowds air. POX loves corners, and corners love evenings, so you patrol the hours when breath and rumor change shifts. Curfew, ration, child's cough, bell. Fever first is your stool beneath the shutter where cheeks confess faster than tongues. Wash before rumor steals wind from the chorus that rehearses around empty pots. Door unbarred receives thirst early, before shame sells it adjectives. Window latched persuades the draft to stop impersonating doctrine. You convert the night into a schedule, because schedule is the enemy of panic and the ally of oxygen. The first alarm walks in on its own feet. A mother from Via Caldana, whose daughter's rash hid beneath braid all afternoon and bloomed at the candle hour. The baker's wife suggests penance. The friar suggests prayer. The gabalier suggests nothing at all, which is sometimes the most merciful suggestion hunger can make. Rope teaches the room its verbs. No crowd at bench keeps pity from hiring lungs. Palate raised persuades gravity to be polite. Knife scalded reminds hands that courage has a temperature. Straw aired discourages tomorrow's contagion from inheriting tonight's sweat. The child sleeps soon enough for honesty and late enough for humility. The mother knocks the plank once, greeting and oath, and carries, which is the right ending whenever you can afford it. Lantern alleys become inspectors when warehouses sleep. You take their accent back to the granary portico and nail it to customs. Wash before coin convinces the night clerk to change the order of his pen and his ladle. Oath copied binds the ration captain to the quarter glass, even when the crowd wants to inherit his time. Billet listed turns strangers in bread lines into sentences the ledger can argue for without blushing. A silk cutter whose dignity has been on layaway since Michaelmas steps forward, rinses without complaint, and learns he likes being right cheaply. You write his name under thanks because your city learns fastest when gratitude is written where boys can read it. Hunger attempts its first riot where lamps refuse to look at each other. 3 lads lift a shutter and discover 7 elbows already negotiating. House first, someone says. POX first, you answer. Witness heard sits them by the basin and steals their rehearsal into minutes. The sisters stare down the evening and win without needing adjectives. The friar lowers his psalm to the key kettles prefer. The gabalieri hold their vouchers like saints who don't need icons tonight. The riot learns how to be a cue. You do not cheer because nobody ate yet. You refill the kettle and keep the rope level with knuckles. Night markets swap more than flour. An herbalist in a scarf that used to be blue offers solutions with the confidence of someone who never baked. Fees displayed taxes, each remedy in lids for wells and loaves for wards. Wash before rumor moves customers into carriers. She leaves damp, annoyed, employable, which is how commerce survives consciences. You stick her name under thanks lower than the baker's wife and higher than the friar, which teaches 3 lessons at once and insults nobody who carried. Because famine turns bedrooms into clinics, you carry grammar to the house chalked suspect contact, where the miller's daughter married into a room with only 1 window. Laundry argues louder than chalk. Door unbarred lets help arrive without asking permission to be admired. Window latched evicts spectators. Palate raised forgives the floor its hunger. Knife scalded, linen aired, swaddles rinsed, convince the hour to be a fact before it becomes a story. The child comes anyway, The friar keeps his voice quiet. The baker's wife keeps the soup honest. Thanks before charges prints 4 names that won't embarrass winter. Ropes survive because they remember where to bruise. You nail a second plank at the granary gate for night use only. The rules are shorter after dusk. Knock twice, wash first, speak last, carry now. The boys love the percussion. The men love the cheapness of being right. The sisters love any sentence that travels without supervision. The quarter-glass boy owns the hour as if he minted it. Nobody argues because arguing hungry is work and carrying is already a job. Because this channel is not a balcony, pause again and make the habit travel. Subscribe and tap a bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 2 reaches you before rumor remembers. It sprints faster in the dark. In the comments, leave the 7 words you would nail at the granary door. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which doorway deserves rope next. The hospital porch, the silk gate, the cistern steps. We have rope, lids, bowls, maps, chalk, a quarter glass that never lies, a plank that refuses flattery, and enough receipts to make thunder into hinges. A steward from the ospedale steps into your circle with an invoice of grace and a face too tired to pretend it was his idea. He asks whether births discovered after curfew count as exceptions. You price his compassion into errands. Wash before rumor quiets his apology. Oath copied ties his promise to the hour. Fees displayed converts his sorrow into lids, and the lane's gratitude into bricks for his stove. He leaves with soup on his sleeve and decency in his pocket, which is all anybody should ever be paid in a famine. The last stretch before sext always tries to spend what the first stretch saved. Tonight, it brings a galley's drum crawling up from the river and into the market. The captain's song argues for the right to sing. Wash before coin says sing after ladles. His crew learn to keep time with kettles. His pride learns to survive with less air. The ration captain learns to write spill paid before duty owed. The friar learns he is braver with sleeves rolled. The sisters learn they prefer the drum when it thinks it's a pail. They clap once. Everyone survives the stanza. You carry what you can't fix. A milk seller whose pockmarked hands have become rumor's favorite allegory asks if she should stop. You change her shift, not her work. Door unbarred moves her route to noon when kitchens have more air. Window latched protects households from their own evening. Witness heard copies her minutes out loud so people remember who fed them at cost. She keeps her job and loses the slander. The boys watching learn influence can be corrected without humiliation. Good. Because endings hire tomorrow or become thirst, you rehearse the drill that always survives priests and podestas. Crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The granary sleeps the sleep of bread that decided to be forgiven. The bagnio wakes with the hope of water well-timed. The friar hums a smaller psalm he can carry. The quarter-glass boy empties his cup with the dignity of a person who earned the city 10 quiet breaths when it was most expensive. And you, who refused to let famine narrate POX, hang the horn lamp on the nail where the next hour will find it without asking permission. If you want me to walk this grammar to the hospital porch where candles audition for medicine, through the silk gate where courtesy becomes ration, along the cistern steps where rumors sprint, and under the porticos where senators attempt to legislate applause, say continue and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 2 arrives on time. Add your 7 words below so we can nail the best where knuckles will meet them before mouths remember how cheap it is to be correct. The hospital porch pretends candles can cure breath, so you rope the paving stones from lintel to bench and set the horn lamp on the almoner's scales until a warm coin of light lands where basin, ration, rumor, and lungs must agree, or Bologna will let famine's piety prosecute POX, while the wards barter with air. Candles bloom like arguments over the threshold. A friar unwraps a relic with the precision of a notary. The Sisters of Mercy recite a list that would rather be a recipe. You answer with minutes. Rope squares the porch. The quarter-glass boy flips his sand, and the Sisters of Steam slide their copper under the arch. The first hiss translating reverence into soup. Witness heard, charter read aloud, oath copied, billet listed, fever first, wash before rumor, wash before coin, door unbarred, window latched, straw aired, pallet raised, no crowd at bench, fees displayed, thanks before charges. The plank says present, and even the taper's smoke remembers how to behave. Because this square is also the screen in your hand, make the small promise that keeps our grammar alive. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 3 lands while your wrists still remember the rules. In the comments, drop your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories. And tell us what your quarter calls sermons sold as medicine. The sisters will nail the bravest beside the well bisexed. A pity procession forms, as they always try to do when hunger wants theater. No crowd at bench turns an audience into carriers. The friar lowers his relic until it becomes a handle. The almoner lowers his voice until it fares no better than kettles. Wash before rumor drowns 3 homilies in a bowl the wards can trust. Fever first seats cheeks on your stool, not ideas. A woman in a shawl, thin as October, names her symptoms like debts. The sisters answer with ladles and a schedule. The quarter glass claims their bargain aloud. The candle sellers sigh, robbed of their crescendo, then discover they can sell wicks to the laundry line for half the trouble and twice the use. They clap once. That is what progress sounds like when it doesn't want applause. The silk gate believes famine exempted courtesy. It did not. You walk grammar into the bolt room, where thread whispers about coin and coin pretends it can bless time. The foreman shows you his beam with the 2 circles greeting and oath painted at eye height. The apprentices knock twice with the relief of boys who have been given a rule they can keep. Door unbarred receives thirst without receipt. Window latched keeps lungs from renting themselves to argument. Wash before coin changes the order of a dozen pockets. A cutter with shoulders like tired bread asks if rinses still count when cloth is rationed this din. More, you tell him, because the thinness steals from breath first. He sets the basin low where knuckles can polish it, and the beam accepts fingerprints the way saints accept smoke. The cistern steps were always rumor's favorite tide stairs. Tonight they discover tariffs. A boy with a pail announces his uncle knows a house where last year's water is safe if you don't ask it to remember. Fees displayed prices his rumor in lids for alleys with none. He pays, learns to carry, leaves with the pail heavier and his voice lighter. Wash before rumor persuades 3 listeners to imitate his new dignity. Thanks before charges names them so quickly that gossip loses the race it thought it started already. Because famine steals privacy first, you nail a second plank at the hospital porch for lost minutes only. 4 lines, no poetry. Knock twice. Wash first. Speak last. Carry now. People obey because simplicity is cheaper than shame. A baker's wife reads it aloud to her husband as if scripture had finally remembered kitchens. A notary copies it into a margin he didn't expect to respect. One of the candle sellers kisses the board with the look believers save for when they find out reverence fits their hands after all. A house chalked suspect contact dares the lane to learn the difference between destiny and damp. The grandmother has cleaned twice already, and the floor still argues like a senator. Palate raised excuses gravity from its worst habit. Straw aired escorts yesterday outside. Knife scalded, linen aired, swaddles rinsed supply courage that doesn't request adjectives. The mother, steady as a psalm that never learned the chorus, breathes long enough for you to trust her. The child arrives and refuses to congratulate anyone, which keeps everyone honest. Thanks before charges lists the grandmother first, then the slowest carrier, then the friar whose sleeves stayed rolled, then the boy who shut the window without instructions. Chalk becomes laundry. Laundry becomes the only sermon worth repeating tomorrow. Because the executori love a map more than a schedule, one arrives with a roll of streets colored the way future arguments prefer. Thanksgiving March, he proposes, to console the afflicted and admonish the careless. You price his rectangles. Fees displayed turns each turn into jugs and loaves. Wash before rumor moves every stanza to St. Sampson's. The sisters insist on the last line, soup after scald. By the time his pointer returns to the first square, gratitude is tired of being a noun and chooses to be a verb. The march retires into deliveries. He looks offended for 10 breaths and improved for a season. The ration captain, who has learned to write spill paid before duty owed, tells you of a loft where 5 bodies sleep horizontally so they can pretend they are separate. POX loves geometry. Rope loves elbows. You climb with the sisters, knock twice so they don't think mercy needs a warrant, and rearrange Freischärner into breathing. Window latched keeps the night from inheriting conversation. Door unbarred keeps help from buying guilt. Fever first rejects a rumor with a cup that never studied Latin. The family learns to like your stubbornness. They will describe it as kindness in spring. You accept future flattery only because you won't hear it. Night tries one of its old tricks. A trumpet at the portico, offering absolution by stanza. Fees displayed, rents his chorus to the poor stove-room. Wash before rumor disbands his audience into errands. Witness heard sets him on the bench with the baker's wife and makes him count the minutes he cost and the lids he paid. He goes home reluctant and employable. His lungs are grateful. That is the only conversion rate you measure this month. Because this channel is the other alley we are holding together, pause again and make our discipline go farther than this video. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 3 arrives before rumor remembers it, runs faster after curfew. In the comments, leave the 7 words you would nail at the hospital porch: fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and name the next doorway that deserves rope: the grain scales, the bishop's vestry, the silk court. We will bring rope, lids, bowls, maps, chalk, a quarter glass that never lies, a plank that refuses flattery, and enough receipts to turn thunder into hinges. A steward from St. Sampson's comes with a request honest enough to deserve yes. Can we make the ladle a rule? You help him write it where children will steal it. Bread before stories. He wants a psalm attached. The sisters promise a hum. That is how doctrine survives famine. It borrows the rhythm of the kitchen. The market tries to relapse. A seller of remedies holds up a jar whose label looks more literate than his hands. Fees displayed buys the jar into lids. Wash before rumor recruits his customers into carriers. He swears at first, and then, to his horror, enjoys being helpful. You let him keep his dignity as if it were your idea. It was his. People behave longer when they own their own improvement. The friar, chastened and useful, arrives with a new question instead of a speech. Who reads thanks when winter is over? You point at the board and say, everyone who wasn't sure they mattered yet. He writes 3 names that aren't his and looks more Christian than he has all week. The last hour. wants to spend what the first hour saved. 3 boys break the rope and sprint. They want a story, not chores. Rope writes their audience into errands. Door unbarred receives thirst. Wash before rumor empties their echo. No crowd at bench refuses to hire their lungs. You make them scrub stones under the window they kicked. They sing the 2 taps to keep time. You write their names on thanks lower than anyone else's. They start there. That is how cities grow elbows. You close this passage by keeping the liturgy no candle can counterfeit. Crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The hospital porch breathes like a shop that sold out of panic before it ran out of soup. The sisters stack cups into columns more persuasive than Latin. The quarter-glass boy empties his sand with the grave satisfaction you hope to teach to winter. Rope, smudged obediently where knuckles met it, rests exactly where the next hour will need to remember. Say, continue, and we will take this grammar to the grain scales when fairness wants a podium, to the bishop's vestry when penance auditions for medicine, through the silk gate when courtesy learns to ration, and along the cistern steps where rumors sprint. Tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 3 arrives with your hands still ready, and put your 7 words below. We will hammer the bravest at mouth height where knuckles will meet them before mouths remember how cheap it is to be correct. The grain scales pretend fairness can be sung, so you rope the stones from beam to beam and set the horn lamp on the counterweight until a warm coin of light lands where measure, basin, rumor, and lungs must agree, or Bologna will let famine praise itself while POX rents corners by the hour. The weighmaster pats his ledger as if arithmetic were kindness. A silk cutter argues that thread deserves priority. 2 friars rehearse a duet of caution and thunder. A little girl with flour on her wrists watches everyone and remembers what is worth repeating. You answer with minutes. Rope squares the stall. The quarter-glass boy flips his sand. The sisters of steam nest a copper bowl against the weigh pan, and the first hiss translates fairness into verbs you can carry without rehearsal. Witness heard. Charter read aloud. Oath copied. Billet listed. Fever first. Wash before rumor. Wash before coin. Door unbarred. Window latched. Straw aired. Pallet raised. No crowd at bench. Fees displayed. Thanks before charges. The plank says present, and even the counterweight stops performing and consents to be exact. Because this stall is also the rectangle in your hand, make the habit travel. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 4 reaches you while your wrists still remember how to talk to wood and water. In the comments, write your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us what your quarter calls sermons sold as medicine. The sisters will nail the bravest beside the well by sext. The Waymaster begins with the speech ration masters reserve for their mirrors. The beam is incorruptible, he announces, stroking the iron like a pet moral. Charter, read aloud, answers with the clause from last winter's vow. Gratitude precedes penalties. Rinses outrank rhetoric. Sand owns the hour. He frowns, finds the basin looking at him the way a mathematician looks at a guess, and rinses like a man determined not to be wrong. Wash before coin changes the order on his table and the shape of his pride. Better, he murmurs. He is right cheaply, which is the only safe way to be right in a famine. A crowd hungry for justice is still hungry. No crowd at bench turns an audience into a queue without wounding anyone's dignity. A silk cutter who normally negotiates by volume pays attention without shouting. A friar who arrived to supervise discovers he likes carrying better. The ledger copies spill paid before duty owed and looks younger by half a century. Witness herd seats a woman who bakes by night on borrowed embers, so mothers can sleep without debt. The scales record her minutes like a psalm that never needed rhyme. The first alarm is quieter than virtue. A boy from Via del Carbone brings a note in his palm and fever in his cheeks. His mother thinks he is ashamed of the note. You think he is ashamed of breathing too loudly near strangers. Fever first steals his shame and lets the rest of him be a child again. The sisters tilt the ladle. The beam, which respects mass more than rhetoric, stops trembling as soon as the boy stops proving anything. The friars see this and decide to rehearse smaller psalms. Because famine invites imagination to double as currency, a seller of potions produces a brown jar named Night Comfort. Fees displayed taxes the jar into lids and brick. Wash before rumor relocates his customers into the queue with everyone else. Witness heard sits him at the edge of the stall, where he admits he wanted to help and settled for attention. You hire him honestly. He becomes the man who carries the small pans when the scale needs to breathe. He leaves damp, employable, and boredom-proof. This is the kind of conversion even skeptics calculate into hope. Lantern alleys export their accent to the scale with the patient's tired hands trust. The baker's wife pins a small sign at mouth height. Knock twice, wash first, speak last, carry now. And the line develops a rhythm even people who do not read can obey. The silk cutter taps the plank in time with the quarter glass and forgets to dislike the friar. A child imitates everyone and becomes the city's favorite prophet because her predictions are chores. The stall chalks suspect contact under the eave because rumor arrived before you did. Laundry undoes it. Door unbarred invites help. Window latched evicts spectators. Straw aired, pallet raised, remind the floor it is not a judge. Knife scalded, linen aired, swaddles rinsed, convince the hour to be a fact before stories devour it. The child arrives and refuses both metaphors, waiting at the threshold. Thanks, before charges, lists the names in the order you hope hunger itself will learn. Grandmother, water carrier, ledger boy, friar with his sleeves rolled. Chalk becomes soap. The line moves. The scale keeps time. Because this city has more balconies than bread pans, an alderman arrives with a rectangle of parchment he wants the beam to honor. Night exemptions for respectable houses, he proposes, smiling the way men smile when a speech feels inevitable. Charter read aloud returns him to the clause he signed by candlelight when courage was cheap. Witness herd seats the baker's wife, the potion seller who became a porter, the girl with flour on her wrists, and the friar who learned to rinse. He counts lungs and discovers exceptions cost more lives than they purchase reputation. He pays lids into the sister's account and leaves better than he arrived. In spring, he will call this prudence. Tonight, you let him call it fatigue. The cistern steps try to sprint a rumor under your rope. POX rides hunger faster after curfew. You meet it with basins. Wash before rumor takes the wheels off its hips. Witness herd gives it chores until it tires. 2 culvert boys arrive with brushes and insolence, clear a channel, and earn their names under thanks, where children will read them in daylight and imitate the posture. The rumor leaves calmer than it arrived, and convinces nobody that destiny outruns decency when decency keeps the hour. Because law forgets to return to the place it improved, you carry grammar into the vestry where candles like to rehearse medicine. The bishop's clerk, surprised by how much he enjoyed being corrected last week, copies a line under his previous theft. Witness heard before penalty, spill paid before fine assessed, and the ink dries like a receipt your grandchildren will be tired of praising you for. The bishop lets you keep the basin low without commentary, which is how bishops admit learning. Night markets bead sweat into slander. A mother with a pock-like scar in a place no one should stare at becomes rumor's lesson plan. Witness heard turns the lesson back into minutes. Wash before rumor returns eyes to their proper vocation. No crowd at bench saves lungs from the corruption of sympathy that requires an audience. The mother knocks the plank twice and discovers courage is cheaper when you rent it with your hands. The rumor dies, ethical, and therefore unprofitable. Because famine reroutes marriages into negotiations with furniture, the rope leads you to a loft where 3 families sleep like grammar, too close, yet legible if you breathe carefully. Window latched persuades air to behave modestly. Door unbarred lets help arrive without purchasing guilt. Straw aired refreshes patience. Pallet raised forgives the floor, its intention to carry grief rather than bodies. A father asks if bread is still the last word. After rinses, you say, and no one argues because arguments are work, and work is already taken. The quarter-glass boy keeps the hour with the gravity of a child who knows adults will imitate him if he is consistent. He flips the cup, the line inhales, the sisters pour soup into bowls that have learned the rhythm of gratitude. Thanks before charges is read without ceremony by the potion seller, who now has ink on his fingers and dignity in his face. He reads slowly, so every name can be used later when winter pretends it never doubted us. Names are sentences in this famine. You refuse to write them wrong. Because this feed is not a balcony, pause once more and nail the habit where your hand can find it later. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one. So part 4 arrives before rumor remembers it, sprints faster after curfew. In the comments, post the 7 words you would hammer at the scales: fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which doorway deserves rope next: the bishop's table, the textile court, the well by the piazzola. We will bring rope, lids, bowls, maps, chalk, a quarter glass that never lies, a plank that refuses flattery, and enough receipts to make thunder into hinges. The last test steals its shape from despair. A drum from the river limps into the square, with sailors who think songs can persuade hungry lungs. Wash before coin puts the melody under soup. Fees displayed taxes bravura into lids and loaves, then hands the drum back so timing can be rented to survival. The sailors knock the plank like men who have just discovered they prefer useful applause to admiration. You add their names under thanks lower than the girls who ladled and higher than the friar who listened. It educates everybody who reads. A shutter slams, and a slur tries to join the line wearing piety. Rope prevents it. Witness heard requires the speaker to carry. He cannot, and the sin evaporates in effort's heat. No one cheers. Everyone eats. The scale remains honest without pretending it is noble. You have to like virtues that do not damage the future. You close the stall with the only ritual famine approves: crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The weighmaster wipes the beam and admits out loud that mercy sharpened it. The silk cutter rinses in public and discovers his enemies are fewer than his nerves imagined. The friars practice the quiet psalm and, to their surprise, understand every word. The little girl with flour on her wrists reads the board with her lips moving. She will memorize this hour because it felt like having more aunts than fears. The rope stays at mouth height, where knuckles can remember. The basin stays low, where fingerprints can bless without permission. The hour stays owned by the smallest reliable instrument in the city, sand falling at a rate no speech can accelerate. POX, robbed of the corners famine built for it, swears softly and goes looking for unpracticed alleys. You intend to make sure it fails to find them. Say, continue, and we will take this grammar into the bishop's vestry when penance additions for medicine, through the silk gate when courtesy learns to ration, alongside the cistern steps where rumors sprint, and under the porticos where senators attempt to legislate applause. Tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 4 arrives on time. And put your 7 words below. We will hammer the bravest at mouth height, where knuckles will meet them before mouths remember the cheapness of being correct. The bishop's vestry pretends penance can sterilize a ledger, so you rope the table from coffer to candlestick and set the horn lamp on the scales until a warm coin of light lands where basin, loaf, rumor, and law must agree, or Bologna will let Famine's piety prosecute POX, while mothers negotiate alone. A canon arranges candles like arguments. A notary wets his reed as if Latin were a ladle. 2 confraternity wardens carry a sheet with the optimism of people who prefer ceremony to chores. You answer with minutes. Rope squares the room. The quarter-glass boy flips his sand. The sisters of steam shoulder their copper to the threshold, and the first hiss translates reverence into soup. Witness heard, charter read aloud, oath copied, billet listed, fever first, wash before rumor, wash before coin, door unbarred, window latched, straw aired, pallet raised, no crowd at bench, fees displayed, thanks before charges. The plank says present, and even the big painted saint over the chest looks pleased to be supervised by common sense. Because this square is also the rectangle in your hand, keep the habit public. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so the next hour lands while your wrists still remember this grammar. In the comments, give your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us what your quarter calls sermons sold as medicine. The sisters will nail the bravest beside the well by sext. The wardens propose edifying sheets for those named suspect contact. Fees displayed prices, each spectacle, in lids and loaves and bricks for St. Samson's stove. They count, wince, and exchange their sheet for buckets. The canon decides an improvised blessing for drying basins would be fitting. You permit it, because basins dry faster when someone loves them. Wash before rumor lowers the choir to the key kitchens can keep. A runner from the silk gate arrives with a ration question disguised as etiquette. The foreman's beam bears the 2 painted circles, greeting and oath, and apprentices knock dutifully, but tempers fray where thread and hunger meet. You carry grammar into the bolt room. Door unbarred receives thirst without receipt. Window latched keeps lungs from hiring themselves to argument. Wash before coin changes the order on 3 tables and 5 moods. The foreman, privately grateful, asks if courtesy still pays this thin. More, you say, because the thinness steals from breath first. He nods, paints a second set of circles at child height, and finds dignity cheaper when knuckles get first refusal. The cistern steps inhale rumor by habit. Tonight they learn tariffs. A youth with more courage than history arrives with a jug and a claim that last year's water is safe if you don't remember its name. Fees displayed charges, the claim in lids for a lane with none. He pays, then carries, and names his water like a man who wants to be believed next time. Witness heard gives 3 listeners the right to imitate him. Thanks before charges prints their names before anyone pretends this improvement was a proclamation. A door chalked suspect contact pretends destiny. Laundry teaches grammar. Door unbarred admits help without buying shame. Window latched evicts spectators. Straw aired, pallet raised persuade furniture to be kind. Knife scalded, linen aired, swaddles rinsed, convince the hour to be a fact. The child arrives. The neighborhood, deprived of prophecy, discovers deliveries. Thanks before charges, orders names in a way winter cannot later twist into poetry without blushing. The notary, charmed by his own pen, produces a scroll to acknowledge public virtue and admonish private carelessness. Charter read aloud returns him to last winter's vow, rinses outrank rhetoric, gratitude precedes penalties, sand owns the hour. He hesitates, the plank receives his knuckles, he signs spill paid before fine assessed, and looks younger for knowing which line matters. A warder murmurs that he never knew humility could be written. Only if it's nailed low, you answer. Lantern alleys export their accent through the vestry without losing dignity. The baker's wife hangs a small board inside the lintel. Knock twice, wash first, speak last, carry now, where even the timid can practice without witnesses. A confraternity warden who arrived ready to direct sorrow discovers he enjoys carrying. A silk cutter who arrived ready to argue discovers he prefers being thanked. The saint over the chest begins to look like he approves of fingerprints. The grain scales creak a summons. A silk foreman and a friar, both certain fairness belongs to them. Rope refuses their duel. No crowd at bench keeps lungs from being hired. Wash before rumor persuades both to like the taste of being correct cheaply. The weighmaster prints spill paid above duty owed, and looks relieved that mercy sharpened the beam. A little girl with flour on her wrists watches, and will, in spring, teach this hour by memory. The cistern steps attempt relapse under a moon that loves exceptions. A poet sells absolution by stanza. Fees displayed rents his chorus to Saint Samson. Wash before rumor disbands his audience into errands. Witness heard parks him on the bench between the baker's wife and the jug runner, until he learns the minute he cost and the lids he paid. He leaves damp and employable. The moon forgives him for not being interesting. That is the only absolution that matters this month. Because power forgets where it learned, you escort grammar to the bishop's kitchen. A steward offers a procession to give thanks and instruct the careless. You price it by corners and coughs. Fees displayed moves each turn into jugs and loaves. Thanks before charges publishes names between psalms. Wash before rumor keeps applause from purchasing air. By the time his pointer reaches the first corner again, gratitude prefers verbs. He looks offended for 10 heartbeats and useful for a season. The silk court debates exceptions with the confidence of men who have never washed in public. Oath-copied ties their promises to the quarter-glass. The apprentices knock in the doorway, knuckles polishing the painted circles. Door unbarred receives thirst early. Window latched uninvites spectators. Wash before coin keeps 4 old men from saying something they'll have to sermonize away later. They sign a rule credited to their own wisdom because they carried before speaking. Let them keep the credit. Buckets already have the profit. A convent on Via San Donato sends to ask if saints dislike fingerprints. The sisters laugh and answer, only on icons, never on basins. The convent hangs its bowl low. Novices practice the taps. The porter writes "witness heard" at the bottom of the guest book. POX, which loves corners more than crowds, finds fewer corners willing to buy its supper. Because endings that don't recruit tomorrow are only decorations, you perform the liturgy that always survives bishops and bailiffs. Crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The canon wipes the basin and forgets to sigh. The notary copies gratitude without preface. The wardens haul instead of lecture. The quarter-glass boy empties his sand with the gravity of a craftsman who knows that minutes, not miracles, fed the hour. This rectangle is the other alley we are holding together. If you want fewer lectures and more rinsing in your world, team chats, classrooms, councils, kitchens, subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so Part 5 reaches you before rumor remembers it, sprinted faster after curfew. In the comments, leave the 7 words you would nail at mouth height: fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us where we should carry rope next: the cistern steps, the piazza by the podesta, the silk gate under lanterns. A last ambush looks like a gift. A senator's steward arrives with candles and a speech to console the afflicted. Fees displayed charges consolation in loaves and lids. Wash before rumor makes the speech a ladle. Thanks before charges names the candlemaker beneath the jug runner and the friar whose sleeves are rolled. The steward signs the margin with the pen of a man who meant to perform and accidentally worked. He will try to brag about this properly tomorrow. Tonight he carries again. You end where breath learned its manners, at the threshold where hands meet wood before mouths meet adjectives. Witness heard is read one more time. Charter read aloud anchors decency. Oath copied nails honor to the minute. Fever first guards cheeks from stories. Wash before rumor guards air from vanity. Wash before coin guards bread from speeches. No crowd at bench guards lungs from applause. Thanks before charges guards memory from misordering. The city exhales like a person who, for 30 breaths in a row, chose verbs. Say, continue, and we will walk this grammar to the piazza when senators rehearse victory, to the cistern steps when rumors sprint, to the silk quarter when courtesy pays, and back through lantern alleys where permission became a language. Tap the bell so part 5 arrives on time, and nail your 7 words below, where knuckles will meet them tomorrow before mouths remember the cheapness of being correct. The piazza pretends applause can feed people, so you rope the edges from the podesta's loggia to the grain scales and set the horn lamp on the marble step until a warm coin of light lands where basin, beam, rumor, and lungs must agree, or Bologna will let Famine's ceremony prosecute POX while alleys barter with breath. Trumpeters test silver mouths they do not own. A herald rolls a parchment that wants to be policy. 2 aldermen weigh gratitude like figs and find it lighter than they hoped. You answer them the only way this hour has taught you, with elbows, with minutes, with the board nailed where knuckles must read before mouths remember to perform. Rope squares the stone. The quarter-glass boy flips his sand like an honest drum. The sisters of steam set copper by the scales, and the first hiss translates pageantry into chores. Witness heard, charter read aloud, oath copied, billet listed, fever first, wash before rumor, wash before coin, door unbarred, window latched, straw aired, pallet raised, no crowd at bench, fees displayed, thanks before charges. The plank says present, and the pigeons who respect nothing hop back 3 feathers and begin to watch. Because this square is also the screen you're holding, do the practical thing that turns attention into rope. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so the next hour lands while your wrists still remember this grammar. In the comments, leave your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which doorway deserves rope next. The sisters will nail the bravest beside the well by sext. The herald begins in the quay balcony's love. In the name of the commune, he sings, exceptions for respectable lanes, litanies to console the afflicted, admonitions for the careless. Charter read aloud returns him to last winter's vow, rinses outrank rhetoric, gratitude precedes penalties, sand owns the hour, and plants his flourish low where fingerprints, not incense, keep it honest. He hesitates. The plank receives his knuckles. Oath copied glues his promise to the quarter-glass. The trumpet raises wind to rescue him and finds the hiss of soup steadier. Pigeons settle. Children grin. Adults reach for buckets. The piazza discovers it has wrists. A busker tries to monetize mercy with a rhyme that makes sores behave like metaphors. Fees displayed, rents his stanza to Saint Samson's stove. Wash before rumor disbands his audience into errands without humiliating anyone. He revises in place, knocks twice between lines, and sells a couplet written in 2 taps. He leaves damp, employable, and less fragile than applause. The aldermen watch him improve and wonder if that is what governance has been trying to do badly. Lantern alleys export their accent to the flagstones, as if common sense were a contagion the city finally wanted. Bianca's sign, smudged by knuckles, hangs inside the loggia, where even soft hands can rehearse the 2 taps without witnesses. Door unbarred receives thirst before sermon. Window latched retires spectators. No crowd at bench keeps lungs from renting themselves to choruses. A silk cutter in a tired coat asks whether courtesy still pays with rations thin as paper. More, you answer, because thinness steals from breath first. He sets a basin low, finds pride comfortable where fingerprints shine, and pretends he knew this last week. You let him keep the pretense. Pretense that carries is practically truth. A suspect contact door at the arcade dares the crowd to prove it has learned. Chalk shouts. Laundry answers. Door unbarred invites help without buying shame. Window latched evicts curiosity. Straw aired. Pallet raised apologize for furniture. Knife scalded. Linen aired. Swaddles rinsed persuade the hour to be a fact. The child arrives. The friar keeps sleeves rolled. The baker's wife keeps the soup honest. Thanks before charges prints names in an order winter can respect. Chalk becomes soap, and the soap becomes the only homily anyone needs. The gabellieri want their duty without rinses. Wash before coin protects both the ledger and the lungs. A ration captain who learned to write, spill paid before duty owed, tells you he sleeps better and remembers more faces than rules. The alderman who signed with dignity yesterday asks if gratitude can be standardized without dying. Low, you say, where knuckles keep it alive. He nods and reads thanks aloud like wages, not miracle, and the piazza matches his tone because imitation is a city's only sacrament that never fails. The cistern steps cough a rumor that thinks it is more urgent than soup. POX rides hunger faster after curfew. Rope arrests it at the marble lip. Wash before rumor removes its skates. Witness heard gives it chores until it is tired enough to help. 2 culvert boys, brushes in fists, dignity in posture, clear a grate like veterans of sense. The quarter glass writes their names large. Pigeons approve by not leaving. Because famine turns recipes into commandments, the bishop's kitchen arrives with a map and a pointer. Processions want corners. Corners want lungs. Fees displayed prices each turn in loaves and lids. Wash before rumor relocates verses to Saint Samson. Bread before stories attaches to the map in letters the wind respects. By the time the pointer returns to the first square, gratitude has learned to be a verb again. The map folds into deliveries. Everyone looks taller for having wanted spectacle and chosen soup. A magistrate arrives with a small rebellion under his hat. He does not want to carry. You give him room not to. No crowd at bench leaves him nowhere to play the part he wrote. Witness heard sits him beside a jug runner whose dignity is measurable. Oath copied ties his reluctance to the quarter glass. He carries once, it hurts. He carries again, it hurts less. Thanks before charges writes his name lower than the jug runners and higher than the friars. In spring, historians will call this prudence. Tonight, it is just minutes with a face. Because power forgets what taught it, you escort grammar to the tribunal, where fines practice vanity. The notary who liked his pen better than his city now copies witness heard before penalty without bravado. The scribe who feared fingerprints writes spill paid before fine assessed in ink thick enough to instruct memory. The sergeant rinses unobserved because heroism that doesn't brag survives famine. You leave without applause because applause spends badly. Night markets rehearse, relapse with jars named comfort. Fees displayed buys the label into lids. Wash before rumor recruits customers into carriers. Witness heard parks the seller beside the scale until he falls in love with usefulness. He does. Tomorrow he will insist he always meant to. The piazza smiles, the practical smile elbowed women wear when men improve on schedule. A mother with a pock-like scar tries to barter herself into safety at the ration line. Shame joins the queue wearing a psalm. Rope prevents both bargains. Wash before rumor returns eyes to their vocation. Witness heard counts minutes instead of stares. No crowd at bench saves lungs from the corruption of sympathy that needs an audience. The mother knocks the plank and discovers boldness is cheapest rented in ladlefuls. The psalm survives, smaller and truer. The quarter-glass boy keeps the hour as if he learned patience from famine and hope from kettles. He flips the cup, and the piazza inhales. He empties the cup, and the piazza remembers history is just minutes recorded honestly. The sisters stack bowls into proofs. The baker's wife posts knock twice. Wash first, speak last, carry now where a child can memorize it while pretending to trace letters. The pigeons, nearly converted, hop nearer. Because this channel is not a balcony, pause again and volunteer your wrists. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so Part 6 lands before rumor remembers it, sprints faster after curfew. Post the 7 words you would hammer at the loggia mouth. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which doorway wants rope next, the silk gate, the cistern steps, the cloister walk. A last ambush tries to rent the square with a trumpet and a pledge to restore joy. Fees displayed charges joy in loaves and lids. Wash before rumor disbands the chorus into errands. Thanks before charges names the trumpet lower than the girl who ladled. He blushes, carries again, writes his name on the board with the shy pride of a man who remembers mornings better than headlines. You close the piazza with the liturgy that never spends itself. Crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The herald rolls his parchment quiet. The aldermen read gratitude like accountants who have made peace with mercy. The friar learns to pronounce brevity. The culvert boys wash their brushes and do not pose. The little girl with flour on her wrists copies one name with care, yours or mine, it doesn't matter, and adds 2 taps in the margin, because she knows which part explains the rest. The horn lamp stays on its nail, the rope stays at mouth height, the basin stays low, the quarter glass keeps honest time. The city sleeps only as much as is compatible with survival. POX, deprived of corners for the 2nd week running, decamps for alleys where nobody has nailed a rule. You intend to make sure it starves. Continue. And we will lift this grammar to the cistern steps when rumors sprint, through the silk gate when courtesy rations, along the cloister walk when penance auditions for medicine, and back through lantern alleys where permission grew into language. Tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so Part 6 arrives while your wrists still remember the cheapness of being correct. And hammer your 7 words at mouth height, where knuckles will meet them before mouths remember how much easier it is to be loud than to be useful. The cistern steps pretend echoes are evidence, so you rope the stone from curb to curb and set the horn lamp on the moss-dark rim until a warm coin of light lands where bucket, measure, rumor, and lungs must agree, or Bologna will let thirst improvise laws, while POX rents the corners your doorways just learned to defend. A water captain claims the stair is neutral ground, and therefore innocent. A herb seller unwraps little jars that promise safety with adjectives. 2 lads in wet sandals sprint up from the drain with a story they swear outruns buckets. You answer the way the hour has taught you, verbs first. Rope squares the approach. The quarter glass boy tips his sand. The sisters of steam drag a copper that hisses people back into themselves. And the board nailed at mouth height reads the small, blunt grammar that never humiliates. Witness heard. Fever first. Wash before rumor. Wash before coin. No crowd at bench. Fees displayed. Thanks before charges. The plank says present. The echo remembers it is not policy. You begin laying out the practice that starves panic. The carrier's cue. The measure is rinsed between each vow. The ledger boy, ink on 3 fingers, dignity on his face, copies spill paid before ration issued, because history behaves better when gratitude breathes first. Wash before rumor drains a circle of clever men who came to consult the stair and remain to lift. No crowd at bench keeps the staircase from becoming theater. The sisters scrub the coping stones, and the public discovers clean grit makes better footing than old eloquence. A baker's wife hangs a second board inside the arch. Knock twice, wash first, speak last, carry now. A child whispers the rule into each bucket, like a password that never expires. Officials try to sell exemptions disguised as logistics. A gabaliere proposes a wholesome surcharge for those who rinse later to compensate the stair's patience. Wash before coin persuades his tables into an order that keeps his ribs and his job longer. A ration captain arrives with letters from the piazza that request a corridor for eminent thirst. Witness heard sits him beside a jug runner and a seamstress who has counted minutes louder than speeches all week, and the corridor retires into errands. The clerks knock the plank with the modest joy of men discovering usefulness before promotion. Everyone survives this stanza because nobody attempted to be interesting while the buckets were talking. Lantern alleys export their accent into the stair without arguing about jurisdiction. Bianca's small sign, 2 circles painted inside a lintel, appears under the arch so shy people can rehearse the taps before the water judges them. Door unbarred receives thirst early, so shame doesn't get to sell tickets. Window latched evicts spectators. No crowd at bench keeps lungs from renting themselves to chorus. A silk apprentice, cheeks raw from sleeping over glue pots, knocks twice and learns that permission is cheaper when you nail it low. His foreman watches, calculates how little this civility costs, and paints the 2 circles on a beam at work. The cistern smiles. Cities love it when crafts trade grammar like tools. Because this cistern is also the rectangle in your poem, do the practical thing that turns attention into rope. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 7 arrives while your wrists still remember this grammar. In the comments, write your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories. And name the next doorway you want roped. The sisters will nail the bravest beside the stair bisexed. A door chalked, suspect contact, 2 alleys off the stair, tries to hire destiny as an usher. Laundry declines. Door unbarred invites help without purchasing shame. Window latched, retires curiosity. Straw aired, pallet raised, apologize for furniture. Knife scalded, linen aired, swaddles rinsed, insist the hour be a fact. The child arrives while two cousins are still rehearsing whose prayer worked. Thanks before charges lists the grandmother first, because loyalty beats eloquence in famines, and people deserve to know. The stare hears the news and pauses its echo for one patient breath. A little girl with flour on her wrists claps once and goes back to counting pails. Authority returns, draped in incense, to retrieve its favorite prop, the sheet. Wardens propose edifying walks for those named suspect contact. Fees displayed prices, each procession in lids and loaves for St. Sampson's stove. They count, wince, and discover that mercy writes better in soup. The bishop's clerk, who has finally memorized witness heard before penalty, spill paid before fine assessed, signs left-handed so the wet page will keep better company. Wash before rumor lowers the choir to a key the kitchens can keep. The saint in the vestry, painted so seriously, begins to look complicit with fingerprints. The silk gate, where thread and temper share a hinge, learns to ration courtesy. A foreman paints two new circles lower than before. Apprentices teach overseers the taps, because habit travels downhill faster than fines. Wash before coin keeps 4 bad sentences from needing sermons tomorrow. Door unbarred receives a thirsty cutter without receipts. Window latched prevents an audience from buying air. No crowd at bench saves wages that would have been wasted as anecdotes. The loom mistress scolds in a voice that means love. The beam accepts knuckles as if pride and hygiene were old neighbors again. Markets, underfed and over-creative, sprout rumor like mushrooms. A painter offers a woodcut of the Angel of the Stair, an alley woman beatified into the problem she solved. Fees displayed buys the plate into ladles and hires the carver to engrave something less flattering and more useful. A basin nailed low, a plank with the rule, a rope that refuses to clap, a clepsydra that never lies. He sulks into employment, then smiles when strangers thank him by name, under thanks because he converted vanity into work. The hospital walkway asks if minutes can be standardized the way prayers pretend to be. You write the lost minute plank for wards that wake unsure. Knock twice, wash first, speak last, carry now. A friar who learned sleeves can be rolled offers to read the names on thanks in the tone paymasters use for wages. The sisters nod permission without ceremony. The steward hears his own name lower than the porter's and higher than the boy with the sand. He accepts the lesson like a man who intends to keep a stove warm for the rest of winter. Street theater reappears, disguised as Thanksgiving. A trumpet climbs the loggia, promising cheer. Rope occupies the measure between brass and bread. Fees displayed rents joy in loaves and lids. Wash before rumor redistributes the chorus into errands. Thanks before charges names the trumpet lower than the girl who ladled and higher than the alderman who listened. He blushes into usefulness and forgets to audition again this week, which is the correct conversion. The quarter glass boy, invited to speak by the people who finally understand what he does, teaches two culvert lads how to keep time with knuckles when the cup is busy. They carry the measure back to their block, paint 2 circles on a post, and begin exporting grammar like smugglers of sense. The rope does not envy them. Ropes exist to retire into habits. Magistrates, after improving once, attempt relax politely. A petition for night indulgences in reputable lanes reaches the cistern like a sigh with a seal. Charter read aloud returns the sigh to the vow, signed when courage was cheap. Witness heard seats the potion seller turned porter, the baker's wife, the seamstress who counted minutes louder than speeches, and the culvert lads. The indulgence becomes a schedule of deliveries. The seal, no longer worshipped, learns to bless. The petitioner carries 2 pails under the smudged gaze of people who like him better for sweating. The piazzola sprouts a booth labeled Comfort. The herb seller, now an apprentice in civic arithmetic, staffs it with ladles and rules. Fees displayed collects lids from those who would have bought poetry. Wash before rumor baptizes them into errands. Thanks before charges prints their names as if education were a receipt. A mother with a scar she used to think explained everything knocks the plank, learns she owes nothing for dignity, and rents boldness in spoonfuls. Because endings that don't recruit tomorrow are only decorations. You keep the liturgy that never seems to age. Crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The cistern steps remember to live below speeches. The piazza remembers to read names like wages. The silk gate remembers that fingerprints on a beam are proof. The vestry remembers that drying bowls can be a sacrament. The hospital remembers that lost minutes are found in schedules, not parables. The POX, deprived of corners for another week, wanders into alleys without boards. You intend to follow, hammer in pocket. Because this rectangle is also the other alley we are holding together, and with the only call that keeps us honest, subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so part 7 lands before rumors sprint. In the comments, post the 7 words you would nail where hands will meet them tomorrow. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which doorway gets rope next. Say, continue, and we will carry this grammar through the cloister walk when penance auditions for medicine, along the silk court when courtesy learns to ration, across the cistern lip when water forgets, and back through lantern alleys where permission became a language people can borrow for their own streets. The cloister walk pretends stone can catechize hunger, so you rope the arcade from column to column and set the horn lamp on a bench scarred by centuries of elbows, until a warm coin of light lands where basin, psalm, rumor, and lungs must agree, or Bologna will let penance spend the last of the winter's grammar, like applause, while POX buys corners with leftovers. A prior counts beads like ledgers. A canon opens his book with the reverence of a baker opening an empty oven. Two novices carry a sheet with the innocence of people who have not yet learned that spectatorship is expensive. You answer, exactly as this hour trained you to answer, with elbows, with minutes, with rules nailed low. Rope squares the walk. The quarter-glass boy turns his sand like a small bell that refuses to flatter. The sisters of steam set copper by the cloister cistern, and the first hiss translates abstinence into soup. Witness heard, charter read aloud, oath copied, billet listed, fever first, wash before rumor, wash before coin, door unbarred, window latched, straw aired, pallet raised, no crowd at bench, fees displayed, thanks before charges. The plank says present, and even saints in fresco suffer fingerprints gladly. Because this cloister is also the screen in your hand, keep the habit public. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so our builds keep landing while your wrists remember the grammar. In the comments, leave your 7-word night rule you would actually hammer at mouth height. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which doorway you want roped next. The sisters will nail the bravest beside the well by sext. The prior proposes edifying walks for those named suspect contact. Fees displayed prices each procession in lids and loaves and bricks for St. Samson's stove. The sheet returns to its chest. Buckets go out. The canon offers a litany for drying basins. You permit it because basins dry faster when loved. Wash before rumor lowers the psalm to the key kitchens can keep. The novices, robbed of spectacle, discover they like soup. The silk court sends a question disguised as humility. Can courtesy be rationed without becoming theater? You carry grammar to the bolt room one last time. 2 circles, greeting and oath, already shine at eye height. You show the foreman the second pair at child height. Door unbarred receives thirst early. Window latched retires admiration. Wash before coin saves wages and faces. The loom mistress lists the names that will be read under thanks, with the attention paymasters give wages. If spring puts temptations back on the shelves, she intends to keep minutes cheap and decency obvious. The cistern lip coughs one more rumor. A poet claims exceptions after sext will restore morale. Rope occupies the measure between stanza and breath. Wash before rumor removes his wheels. Witness heard sits the culvert lads and the potion seller turned porter. Thanks before charges names the new shy carriers who are the city's favorite surprise. The poet revises on the spot, knocks twice between halves, and discovers applause that feeds someone tastes better than applause that feeds a sentence. The piazza wants to license joy. A trumpet and 3 aldermen propose a closure of thanks. Charter read aloud returns them to last winter's vow, rinses outrank rhetoric. Gratitude precedes penalties. Sand owns the hour. Fees displayed charges each flourish in loaves and lids. By the end of the reading, joy has become deliveries that do not require witnesses to succeed. The aldermen practice humility in public and survive. The trumpet volunteers to time the cue. He is happy without being interesting. Because law survives only where it revisits the place it improved, you carry grammar into the tribunal to close the ledger without injuring memory. The notary who stole your rules for the page arranges them in an order that will age better than sermons. Witness heard before penalty, spill paid before fine assessed, thanks before charges read at sext. He looks younger writing this than he did this autumn learning it. The sergeant rinses without audience. The copyist adds a narrow column called Lost Minutes Found, and names the plank, the basin, the rope, the quarter glass, and the sisters as instruments of record. Bureaucracy, used properly, is just gratitude with better archiving. Lantern alleys return, not for absolution, but for inventory. Bianca carries her common sense board like a guild charter and asks, "What do we keep when the breadlines shrink?" Low basins, you say, 2 taps, boards at mouth height, names read aloud, windows latched against theater, doors unbarred for thirst. She nods. The alley will remain a language even when headlines forget it. The baker's wife nails one last plank. Knock twice, wash first, speak last, carry now. Children trace the letters and discover the city fits their hands. A shutter slams near the grain scales, and rumor tries its final coat of piety. Those with marks must stand in white. Fees displayed purchases the sheet into bricks. Wash before rumor disperses the audience into errands. Witness heard seats, the friar who learned sleeves, the jug runner who learned schedules, the grandmother who learned weather. A senator arrives late with a flourish he cannot spend. Oath copied glues his promise to the clepsydra. He carries and looks relieved in the way men do when usefulness rescues their dignity. Because every winter gifts the next its tools or its regrets, you perform the drill that aches without being ashamed. Crates down, rope unknotted, bench set back, board left up. The sisters push copper toward the next ambition that confuses applause for policy. The quarter-glass boy empties his cup into a new one he presses into a culvert's lad's palm. The lad's grin is the least ceremonial transfer of power your city will ever witness, and the most important. The saint in the fresco watches fingerprints dry on the basin and decides that sanctity old enough to help is sanctity old enough to be smudged. Because this channel is the other alley we hold together, end where we began, with a call that buys tomorrow. Subscribe and tap the bell, the practical one, not the theatrical one, so the next build begins where your curiosity is strongest. In the comments, give the 7 words you would nail where hands will meet them tomorrow. Fever first, window latched, bread before stories, and tell us which century and street deserve rope next. Why Bologna watched famine nights for POX will read when someone writes it honestly, like a ledger that discovered grammar. Rope made permission public, basins made laughter honest, minutes paid for courage in a currency strangers could afford. Lantern keepers stopped 3 kinds of extortion: moral, fiscal, narrative, by selling rinsed time. Baths promoted scald to scripture without begging a choir. Priors learned brevity. Aldermen learned sand. Notaries learned to copy gratitude before fines. Gabalieri remembered they liked living. Culvert boys became men. The stair learned tariffs. The piazza learned to end without trumpets. The city did not become pure. It became legible and therefore survivable. Why this matters after famine is because the grammar is portable. A low basin nailed where knuckles can polish it. A plank that bruises wrists before mouths recruit thunder. Rope that refuses to clap. A quarter glass that never lies. A list where thanks before charges prints the order children should memorize when they inherit your street. Any neighborhood can nail this liturgy. Yours can. So here is the hinge between story and schedule. We'll bring rope, lids, bowls, maps, chalk, a quarter glass that keeps time when bells audition for thunder, a plank that refuses flattery, and 1,000 small receipts. You bring elbows. Name the next theme title in the comments. We will hammer it into minutes until the myth stops shouting and the basin keeps breathing. Tap the practical bell and meet us at the door you want to teach.